Our topic for this discussion is sabbaticals for pastors. And Ryan, I guess first, what is a sabbatical for a pastor?
Rest of some sort, or diversion of some sort, I suppose. For some churches, that's a year off on the seventh year of that job, or every seventh year. But I mean, in some ways, a Sabbath can be something in the middle of a summer. I think we need rests of all kinds, not just waiting for the big one, but a strategic rhythm of work and rest.
Although I think probably most pastoral sabbaticals are 3 months or so every 7 years. Is that what you've seen, Bob?
Yeah, that's generally been the pattern. But, back to before we started taping, it's because as needed. Now, that doesn't mean every year, but, sometimes after 4 years, you're wiped out. You've had an issue. You've had a series of emotional stresses in the pastorate, and maybe it deserves one, and others can maybe go 10 years for it. I mean, as a pastor, you have to have Sabbath rest as a principle in life. All of us do. And the question is, when do you get organized about it and do something more planned out, more substantive?
Now, but we might say this, look, Pastor, everybody has jobs. And we're all under stress. You're not the only person with stress, and we don't get to take 3 months off, a year off, or whatnot. Are you suggesting, Bob, that there's something about the nature of the work of the ministry, of the ordained ministry, or the full-time vocational ministry, that without some special rest will not allow long-term fruitfulness? Are you saying that?
Generally speaking, yes. And I think, look, God designed us all differently. And some of us need more rests and more often and longer than others. But in general, you're right. I mean, you guys know, the stresses and strains of dealing with people are different from the stresses and strains of dealing with numbers. Now, I deal with people too. I have to manage people and fire people and hire people and organize people. But the whole issue of the deep inner soul issues, I can only speak from being at the fringe, wears you down.
Yeah. A professor would have time off, right? Even a high school teacher would have a summer off to rethink things and to prepare for the upcoming year. And I think because pastors prepare so much and do soul work, and because there's leadership involved, there's an importance in getting away and rethinking
So
things
some of
and
it is simply because
strategizing.
of the intellectual and spiritual intellectual work of someone whose job requires him to preach every week. We put together literary productions, in some of our cases, morning and evening every week. You do it for year after year. You need to go out and get some new material in your reservoir. You need to, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Do you notice a certain time in the schedule? How many weeks in a row does it take before you feel dry?
Yeah.
Do you know that number?
No, I don't
do.
know.
I think it's probably 6 or 7 or 8 for me, and I just feel like, man, I need a Sunday
break.
off to just refresh. I'm just pushing too hard, and just it's all front burner stuff, right? It's boilerplate.
So
No,
part
see,
of it is the
it's-
church just being wise about the importance of the preaching ministry, and the person who's vocational calling to do that needs to go off and do professional development even. Go to Tyndale House and study Puritans for a summer, that kind of thing.
So agree. And some progressive companies in the secular world are starting to use sabbaticals. They realize that refreshment makes a better employee. And the principle's the same. We need to disengage. We need to be, can I say, rewired, recharge our batteries. And that can be, like you say, continuing education, a change. For me, I play the organ and lead the choir. I have a sabbatical every Sunday. It's so different from what I do the rest of the week.
I saw just today, someone had done an article, it was on the internet actually, about children, PKs, pastors' kids. And one of they said, what's the bad side of being a pastor's kid? And they said, my father's always burdened with other people's problems.
Yes.
And I want to say, leave my dad alone. He never gets rest. When you got 600, you got 1,000 people in the church, somebody's going through a crisis all the time, and he's the shepherd. And is it the weight of that accumulates on people?
Yeah, the constancy of it. I think you made a great point, Bob. Pastor's job is also his church and his family. These things are all wrapped up into one, and it would be nice sometimes to have those things separated a little bit more, and maybe that's a reason.
So you mean that we're human beings like everybody else?
So the issue of delegation, you can delegate certain parts of what you do, and all of what you do over short periods of time. How did the two of you do that as pastors, if I can ask?
Well, let me say
as
that
it relates to sabbatical.
you certainly delegate functions. I have an associate minister who, if you go to the hospital in my church, he's going to get there every time, and I'm going to be there more exceptionally. And so you have all the routine stuff you plan for. But if your church is large enough, you also have, for us, the unusual is routine.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
because when you get a deadly diagnosis that says that you're likely to die soon, you want your preacher. Or when your husband is sinning against you in an extraordinary way. And so for the senior minister especially, the extraordinary happens enough in a large enough church that we're constantly dealing with things that really require us.
Right.
And you can't, if you're there, you have a duty
Yes.
to answer it. And so I remember when I was first converted, the founding pastor of the church had been there for 44 years, and they told the story of him in the 1800s, except for the 2 years in which he had a health breakdown. And at the time I said to myself, how can you have a health breakdown being a minister? I mean, how hard can it be? Well, I spent the rest of my life getting an education on that. And
all
so
answered now.
how do we bring rest? Let me just say this, Ryan. If in between maybe every seventh year rest, maybe every seventh year there is a 3-month break, but like you were saying at the beginning, how do we help our pastors to emotionally and spiritually take the burdens off so that they can be people and refresh along the way and not just at the end of a period of time?
Yeah, well, one thing my elders sort of require of me unofficially and without specificity is they suggest every 6th week or every 7th week I have a Sunday off. So I might work that week, but I don't preach that Sunday. Now sometimes it goes 8 or 9, and that's my fault.
See, I'm not
theirs.
willing to give those
Yeah,
sermons.
yeah.
I'm the problem.
Let me ask you this. Here's another dynamic. Is we're talking as pastors who have staffs.
Yes.
And you said it's those mechanisms are in place for us to get away at times. What about the small church pastor?
Everywhere I
the only
go,
one.
probably like you, I speak at a lot of building dedications and smaller church type things.
No, I don't.
And
But
I
go ahead.
often will say to them, get this man an assistant. Like if you've got a 200-member church
Somebody
and
in
a
that
solo
church.
pastorate, challenge the church to give more, to give him an assistant, because 200 souls is a lot for one shepherd to never have relief. And now for him, while he's preparing his sermons, he is the guy who goes
all
to the
those
hospital
issues,
every.
right.
There is no one but him. And I really think, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. And I think we've not been wise. Our church is helping plant a church plant in Charleston, South Carolina right now, and we made the decision that we would not do it unless the man went with an assistant. And we just raised the money that he would go there with an assistant. And I think that we're not being wise with the whole one man and his family in the wilderness.
Do you all protect some time each and every week that's Sabbath rest? I know our pastor, for example, Monday, he tries
I do too.
no meetings, not going to answer the phone.
I take my Mondays off.
Yep, and you do take them
Oh,
off.
yeah.
I do eventually. So what I mean by that is it may be Saturday, it may be Monday, but I get a
Yeah,
day
you
off.
get a day.
Yeah.
Well, I think experienced ministers know you've got to plan for rest.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And we are human beings, and the burdens we bear, and our churches are wise to say, what are we doing to make sure our pastor's not being ground down by what even the Bible will say are extraordinary burdens that the pastor, Paul says, and on top of all these things, I carry the burden of the church. And I think we would give a plea to folks watching to think about how to alleviate that burden.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.